when I meet senior leadership teams, they always complain to me about the same things. Like, no one follows our instructions. Communicating is really hard. We have different teams pulling in different directions. Everyone's, slavishly devoted to the plan, even when the plan makes no sense. People don't experiment enough. There's not enough innovation, blah, 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 blah. And I always say, great, excellent. I'm sure all that is true. Now look in the mirror. Now you're looking at the problem. Okay. All those people work for you. So if they're all, like, think about it, if they're consistently doing the wrong thing, what is the one thing they have in common? You. They all work for you. You are the source of the problem. Are you really willing to change? And most people are like, nope, thanks for coming in. Like, I'd rather, can you sell me a tonic? Can you sell me some snake oil? Can I, and you see that now with all these AI vendors being like, oh, instead of you having to change anything, just sprinkle a little AI fairy dust on there and boom, all your problems will be solved. No, at the end of the day, how you hold people accountable, what you hold them accountable for, and what your values are as a leader ultimately will determine how the organization adapts and evolves over time.
Welcome to Franklin Covey's On Leadership. I'm your host, Jennifer Colosimo. On Leadership provides insight to our listeners through discussions with senior leaders, thought leaders, practitioners with earned experience, all focused on the human side of strategy and transformation. Today's guest, Ries, is the author of the book Incorruptible: Why Good Companies Go Bad and How Great Companies Stay Great, a guide on maintaining company integrity and mission as organizations grow. As the author of The Lean Startup, The Startup Way, and founder and CEO of the Long-Term Stock Exchange, Ries is central to the agile approach to building organizations, and through the Long-Term Stock Exchange, encouraging companies to prioritize long-termism. Ries, thank you so much for joining. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for taking the time.
I want to start us with your journey from the Lean Startup to the Startup Way to the Long-Term Stock Exchange and now Incorruptible. What's the thread that connects it for you all?
I remember when I first signed up for Twitter all those years ago, it asked me, you have to set your bio. And I just said, trying to change how startups are built. And I feel like that's it. I've just been pulling on this simple thread of this sweater, trying to help people who want to create something great actually do so. And every time I feel like I found the answer, that just leads me into the next round of challenges, the next kind of problems. I feel a bit like my life is like a video game where the boss of one level is now the Goomba on the next level, now there's an even bigger boss. Like, I keep going through that transition. But yeah, to me, it's always had one very simple, clear objective, which is really to help people be more effective when they want to create something new.
Well, as you've gone through this process, you've started with startups, then, this works for all corporations. As you've gone from that to now systems and structures, what have you had to learn or unlearn about your own personal leadership?
Yeah, I really think that, I'm from San Francisco. So of course, when I say things like entrepreneurship is a process of self-discovery, people sometimes feel like I'm being a little woo-woo, but sorry, that's definitely been,
I don't think it's woo-woo. I want to hear about it.
Yeah, that's been 100% been my experience, that you learn a lot about yourself by trying to chase after the truth, whatever that is. And you see that in science, you see that in the arts. I think entrepreneurship is one of those truth-seeking disciplines, because at the end of the day, you can only be successful at it if you can figure out the extent to which your plan is in alignment with what is actually true about customers, about the world, about the market. And so, yeah, I've learned a lot about my own style leadership. Turns out I'm an extreme delegator, not because I read it in a book that you should delegate, but it's always seemed natural to me to try to hire the very best people I can, and then to find the things that they're passionate about and set them loose to do that. In some ways, I enjoy doing that more even than having them do what I want. So many of the organizations I've started, many of the jobs I've been able to create for people have been springboards to them getting even better jobs somewhere else. And I really enjoy that. Like, I feel like I like to be a career accelerator for the people around me, even though that sometimes makes my life a lot more difficult. But yeah, that's definitely my style.
There's a couple of interesting things there. I mean, a lot of people resist delegating. So I'd love to hear what you learned in your path to be an extreme delegator in doing it well. I heard you link it to their passions and their development, and you're really looking for their opportunity. What else?
The other thing I learned is that I used to really think that being an entrepreneur meant doing everything yourself. So like, I thought my skill as a contributor was the thing that gave me the authority to lead. So that for the people who've been through that transition, that's not true. And the challenge, of course, is to figure out, okay, how do you maintain that sense of craftsmanship and integrity of the thing itself, while also being able to bring other people and let them kind of drive the details in a way that you're no longer able to, since you're not the one doing it with your bare hands. And that's a perennial problem in leadership, because if you become too abstracted away from the thing itself, your leadership is not valuable anymore. But if you're too
Hmm.
stuck in the weeds, then you can lose sight of all the strategy you're supposed to be the shepherd of. So I find that challenging, just like everybody else. But I feel like as I've gotten older with it, I've gotten both more comfortable micromanaging and more comfortable delegating. And you realize that both are like extreme forms of the real art of management, which is the discernment of what tool to use in what circumstance. And rather than saying I got to follow a blanket rule, you start to realize, okay, there are a bunch of tools or practices, and sometimes one supersedes the other. And the challenge is, how do you find those moments to be superseding while still maintaining some sense of your overall principles? It's not an easy balance, but I feel like, for me anyway, as I've gotten more mature about it, it's less stressful because I'm more comfortable with the fact that that's going to take work to figure out.
The discernment takes work. So, Franklin Covey partners with organizations focused on high performance. And we always hear about some of the central concepts in all of your books, but I'd love to talk about kind of the balance. We hear we want our employees to be more growth oriented, more agile, more creative. And on the other hand, they're burned out. We've got change
Yeah, no,
exhaustion.
you don't. No, you don't. You say you want all that stuff, but then, yeah, most companies are not really willing to do what it takes to actually achieve that outcome.
So that's what I want to hear about. Is I'm sure you hear that tension. You were really quick to say, no, you don't. You don't want it enough to. How do you advise that tension, whether it's through your books, through your speaking in your new book?
Oh yeah, well, I've done a lot of work with companies on these issues in particular, and when I meet senior leadership teams, they always complain to me about the same things, like no one follows our instructions, communicating is really hard. We have different teams pulling in different directions. Everyone's slavishly devoted to the plan, even when the plan makes no sense. People don't experiment enough. There's not enough innovation. Blah 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 blah. And I always say, great, excellent. I'm sure all that is true. Now look in the mirror. Now you're looking at the problem. Okay, all those people work for you. So if they're all, like, think about it, if they're consistently doing the wrong thing, what is the one thing they have in common? You. They all work for you. You are the source of the problem. Are you really willing to change? And most people are like, nope, thanks for coming in. Like, I'd rather, can you sell me a tonic? Can you sell me some snake oil? Can I, and you see that now with all these AI vendors being like, oh, instead of you having to change anything, just sprinkle a little AI fairy dust on there and boom, all your problems will be solved. No, at the end of the day, how you hold people accountable, what you hold them accountable for, and what your values are as a leader ultimately will determine how the organization adapts and evolves over time. So if it's gross and malign and you don't like it, then it's time for some introspection about how you are yourself the cause of that. But not to like flagellate yourself. Like, this is not therapy.
Right.
The purpose of it is to identify, well, what do you want people to do? So, like, just give a very simple example. This is in the new book, I tell a story. I was once working with a
Please.
team that was given $1 million budget to go do some experimenting. And this is a company that was trying to adopt lean startup. So they're explicitly telling everybody, be more entrepreneurial, be more innovative, try some stuff out. Executives love this project, given $1 million to go run. Now, normally in the company's classic management system, they would have spent 18 months spending the $1 million, after which they would have then like produced a report about whether it was working or not.
Mm-hmm.
When it inevitably wouldn't have worked. They would have been like, oh, well, at least we spent the $1 million on time, on budget. Everyone would get promoted and they'd move on. This is the very thing that they're working with me to try to prevent. It's okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a workshop with the team. We figure out, they do an MVP that costs $10,000. And it doesn't go very well. And that team's like freaking out. We can't tell anybody. Oh no, this is their pet project. They love this thing. And they're like, well, it's only one experiment. Let's do 10 more. So they do 10 MVPs in a row, $10,000 each. Like, when you, at this point, you've done 10 experiments and you come back
10.
and say, there is absolutely no market here. This thing is a terrible idea. You know it. Like, And I was like, look, you got to have the courage. You're going to go back and we're going to tell your boss. Anyway, so they do it. Now, the executive who had sponsored the workshop was really pleased. He's like, oh, that's great. Good job. You did something really agile, whatever. I'm a little stung that you didn't like my idea, but okay. But they got so much flack and trouble They were being constantly harangued the whole time. Like finance people kept showing up and being like, why didn't you spend your budget on time? And every
Mm.
middle manager they interacted with were like, if you were good at your job, you would have predicted this was going to happen. So I'm like, good job, everybody. You saved the company $900,000, but everyone else in the company is mad that they wasted $100,000 on a product that nobody wants. Like they were on track to waste $1,000,000, but like something about this idea that like you deviated from the plan, the thing wasn't a success. Like we've indoctrinated people into the idea that failure always results from insufficient planning.
Mm-hmm.
Or insufficient skill at executing the plan. Ignoring the possibility of the underlying uncertainty of our situation might make planning difficult or impossible. So that's like a classic example where people say they have the value of wanting innovation, but they also want to be able to punish people for failure. It's like, sorry, you
It
can't do
is
both.
it's a clear example. And so tell me, let's say I was that leader, our listeners were that leader, or that management team. Think culturally, if it's not specific to a leader. What are some of the things you do to help us break that cycle of we've got a plan, and oh, that wasn't saving any money. They spend 100,000. What are some of the things, both in your book and in your work with clients, you tell us to start working on?
So the root issue is, can you accept that most of the business techniques that we have learned over the course of the 20th century have their origin in a system of forecasting? If you go back
Mm-hmm.
to like my years with Alfred Sloan, my years at GM by Alfred Sloan, like one of the classic books, so you read any of the classic management books of the early 20th century, you will be shocked at how difficult business was before we figured this out. So I don't mean to, like, forecasting is not something to be benchmarking, forecasting, holding people accountable to the forecast. Those are breakthroughs, okay? Those are really good things. They were very effective techniques. Life without them was very difficult. But they have a hidden flaw or liability, which is they require accurate forecasts to function. Where do accurate forecasts come from? You could only have an accurate forecast if you were extrapolating from a long and stable operating history.
Mm-hmm.
And who feels like the world is getting more and more stable every day? Right? Like, give me a break. Look, read a newspaper, buddy. So,
Right.
and of course, when we're trying to do something new, we're intentionally trying to make it uncertain because we're doing something new by definition. So
Right.
there's a 3-phase process I've worked with a lot of leaders to get through this. And the first phase is you first have to prove to yourself, you don't have to prove it to me, prove to yourself that a new way of working is possible. So don't try to change the whole company. Don't try to give, like, people always like, buy the book for everybody, give them directives. I mean, listen, I love you, buy my book for everybody. That's wonderful, but I don't think that's very effective. What's really effective is you take one team, one group of teams, one project, you start to do experiments that you personally oversee. Don't delegate this to somebody else. This is a time for personally overseeing a project that is going to work in a different way. And if you do this right, what you'll realize is that in order to work in a new way, you're going to have to make a ton of exceptions. And if you leave that to the team to figure out on their own, you're doing them a disservice because they're going to piss off like 100 middle managers.
Mm-hmm.
Middle managers are like ninja assassins. Like, they will find you and kill you. Okay.
And also finance.
Oh yeah, finance,
The
legal,
middle
compliance,
management.
everybody who's
Yeah.
used, like, and what people don't realize is if you run a large company, you operate at great expense, what I call a creativity dampening field. You pay
Mm.
people to pretend they're not creative. Okay. You pay middle managers to punish people if they deviate. You create this incredible force of conformity, and then you complain about it to me. And I'm like, well, you're the one
Mm-hmm.
paying to make it happen. So you're like, how do I get more creative people? I'm like, you don't. You just stop forcing them to be uncreative. They already work here. They're actually about to quit because they're sick and tired of this. Okay. So by making the exceptions yourself, what you'll do is you'll have a team, you'll teach them to work this new way, have them read Lean Startup or, attend one of our workshops or something. You'll learn this new method. Then everything they try to do, they will be blocked by a middle manager somewhere. And your job is to have them tell you every time that happens. So you can go say, listen, on my authority, let's make an exception and let's just see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So you work by exception, and you do that with one project, 2 projects. I remember we did this for GE. We wound up training tens of thousands of managers in the end, but we started with like 1 project, and then we did 4 projects, and then we started to do 4 projects at a time in regular workshops, and then we were doing 8 projects at a time, and then 12. We just gradually increased the quantity until leadership was ready to say, oh, now we have enough data. Now we're convinced. Let's go. And now let's deploy it company-wide. And then you can do company-wide trainings and things like that. And really only in the 3rd phase, after you've done that, can you start to adjust what I call the deep systems of the corporation. to align with the need to do this. So that's where we go change how budgeting is done, how teams are formed, how resources are allocated, how people are held accountable, that kind of stuff.
So you're definitely doing a team, some level of safety, move it out, clear the path. What are some of the lead measures that you look at during that second phase when you're looking at how to measure it before you go systemic?
So it's, people always ask me, is phase one tops down or bottoms up? And I'm like, yes, exactly. Good. God, now you understand. Because although nominally it's a very, phase one tends to be very grassroots. We're finding the entrepreneurs and empowering them. We're doing all these projects. But the purpose of phase one is to demonstrate to leadership that this way works. And I'll never forget one of the early skeptics I had to work with. I remember I was with a very big company, and there was like one guy that everyone was like, he just does not like change. He will not change anything. You know, he's your biggest obstacle. And I was like, well, great. Let's have one of his teams in the first wave for sure, because we need to confront that head on. And he was just like, look, I think this is a waste of time. Who do you think you are telling on him? I'm like, yeah, I hear you. But I was like, with all respect, why is this a mistake? Like, why? Tell me everything wrong with this approach. And he's like, you're gonna have this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. I was like, great. But if it worked, is there anything you'd want to see that would make you excited? He's like, well, I'll tell you what I want to see. I want to see an improvement in cycle time. I'm a believer in cycle time. So you show me an improvement in cycle time with one of my teams, I'll believe you. I was like, great. That's my purpose in life now, is to figure out how to show you what you need to see to be convinced. And I'll never forget, we did this 30-day workshop. We brought him in at the end. The team did a report out to him. And he was like, oh my God, you improved cycle time by 10x. And he was like, I was like, now I want to know how the magic trick was done. You know, did you just tell him to say that or whatever? I was like, I promise I didn't use the phrase cycle time with him one time. So he became really interested, really curious. And he was like, I remember him later, we were doing like a debrief with the whole executive team. And he's there with the CEO and everybody else. And he's like, guys, I realized that I'm the problem. The boss kept telling everyone to do it fast. And then he leaves the room and I say, guys, definitely do what he said, but also, do it right. And they were getting the message from me to ignore what he said and stick to our old ways. So like he had this epiphany, and he went from being our biggest detractor to our biggest supporter, because he had seen the metric that he understood to be the powerful one, not the one that I thought was most useful, the one that he thought was most useful. That converted.
That makes complete sense. I read a review of your book, and it said that it successfully weaves fiduciary duty and human flourishing. Was that Daniel Pink?
Yeah, it sounds like it. It does sound
Yeah,
like it. Yeah.
it was fiduciary duty and human flourishing. And I think that's so important because, of course, as leaders, we're responsible that we have a ongoing enterprise, right? It doesn't go down through these experiments, but that we're bringing it up. Tell me more about that balance. I loved the words, because how can you turn away from fiduciary duty and human flourishing together?
Yeah. I felt bad for my publisher, because I was like, look, I want to write this book and it's going to be about governance and fiduciary duties. And they were like, please, is there anything else you can write about? Like, really? That's what we have to talk. I'm like, look, but I promise I'm going to make it really interesting, because I will show by the end the reader that if they are willing to change their ideas about these really boring things, they can build organizations that are designed in their bones to maximize human flourishing. I was like, well, could we just make it about that? Can you skip the other bits? Can we just talk about human flourishing? And I was like, no, we already are awash in manifestos about this. I'm not going to write another manifesto. Okay, yeah, we should be more ethical in business. We should, take care of customers or be stakeholder friendly or whatever. Enough of that stuff. I feel like people are like sick and tired of being lectured at. Meanwhile, they're like, business is already so hard. Now you want me to do extra in addition to all the other stuff I have to do? Now I all have to worry about my stakeholders or whatever, and you're not giving me any operational guidance on how to do that and all. And big part of my insight in writing this book is that the reason business is so hard is because nobody trusts you. Business has actually gotten a lot harder than it used to be, because we have allowed trust to fully and completely erode. And we see that in the data. Like, anyone who's looked at this, like, trust is collapsing across the board. I don't have to tell you. I'm sure you know very well. But what's interesting to me about it is, when you talk to younger people, they don't understand how trust could have collapsed, because they can't even imagine ever having lived in a world where you would trust an institution. That whole concept is foreign to them. And they're like, wait, you're telling me my parents and my grandparents, they trusted their boss? They thought the company would take care of them? Like, how stupid were they? Really? Like, they thought that? They trusted the government? Like, what? And you're like, no, really? Like, look at the data. Like, 75% of people used to. Now it's only like 20% of people. They can't imagine. So we've lost it so thoroughly, we can't even remember what it was like. And as a result, We don't understand how many of our modern business best practices took this for granted as a default backdrop, and now they don't work anymore. So when people are like, "Oh, business is too hard," I'm like, "Well, business would be a lot easier if your customers, your employees, and your investors trusted you. So would you be willing to do what I call harder is easier? Do the upfront work that is harder of earning their trust, so that later on the things that you're currently complaining about to me will go away." And not every leader is ready to do that, but the ones that I've had the privilege of working with that are willing to do that have seen remarkable, almost unbelievable levels of competitive advantage accrue when you unlock this superpower. And as a result, it makes possible a new class of organization. One is not like, I call them basically mission hopeful versus mission driven. If you want to be mission driven, you have to actually be committed to the mission at all times, even when nobody's watching. Otherwise, you're just mission hopeful. And when you are mission hopeful, people are cynical about it. They're like, well, you say you have a good intention, but how do I, how can I really trust that you're actually going to do what you say you're going to do? When you build an organization that's mission driven, you have woven the commitment, the promise to do that into its very sinews, so that then you become a trustworthy counterparty. And I think trustworthiness is today the most underrated asset in all of business.
Well, there you're going to get wholehearted agreement. In our work with trust, even our institute stats, our Franklin Covey has the same sort of stats you're saying. They don't trust their leaders. They don't trust the management style of their leaders. And we also believe that it is the most underutilized asset, that you can really have costs go down and speed go up. I would love to dive into that a little bit more about how you have them create the conditions so that mission driven is really what's happening and not mission hopeful. What are your ideas there?
Yeah. So in the book, I do diagnose how we got into the situation. I do give the history and the philosophy. Okay, I do. But the majority of the book is about the blueprint. How do we solve this problem? And here's my promise to anyone who chooses to read the book. I promise that every technique I'm about to describe and every technique in the whole book is, first of all, something that can be implemented today. There's not a single thing that's like, well, after the trust is restored, then, or after the government changes the rules, or no, everything is a rule. It's something we can do today. Second, every technique is backed up by case studies, so we can study an actual individual company grappling with that issue to learn from them. And third, they're all backed by extensive academic research that these things work. It's not just my personal like pet theory, like, oh, it sounds good or whatever. No, these are real operating techniques we have data for. So roughly speaking, the blueprint is divided into two halves. The first is what I call the path of ethos, and the second is what I call the path of integrity. And I picked words that are a little bit different, a little bit old-fashioned compared to our modern discussions about culture and stakeholders and ESG and whatever. Because I just feel like that entire conversation has become almost surreal in its absurdity. So none of that. Old-fashioned words like fiduciary and trustworthiness, because like we need to recover a wisdom that our grandparents and our great-grandparents had that we have lost. In the path of ethos, we focus on building an organization that can be trusted because it has a character. It behaves a certain way consistently, even when nobody's watching, even when there's no incentive or reward to do so. And this is mostly an operational discipline, about how do we establish a corporate purpose. I actually think the true meaning of what it means to be a for-profit company is you are an institution designed to maximize human flourishing. That's literally what it means to make a profit. But unfortunately, we live in a business culture in the era of shareholder primacy that says that organizations are not vital living things. No, they're just financial instruments designed to enrich shareholders. Now, look, nobody who actually works for a living actually believes this to be true. Okay, just being real here. Like, people who build things for a living are not like super pumped to be like, yeah, of course, I'm just working for a financial instrument. Of course not. Nobody thinks that. We all have what I call the builder's intuition, the intuitive understanding that the best way to make money is to create new value and then to capture some of that for yourself, leaving the world better off than you found it. Yet we're all told we have to pretend we think all ways of making money are equally good, but nobody does. So you don't have to pretend anymore. Like I said, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and generations of scholars going all the way back to Aristotle understood that there are better and worse ways of making money. And we in our society, so many of the ways we celebrate that people make money today, not only would our grandparents have seen them as morally dubious, they would have been actual crimes, like not that long ago. Okay, so we have legalized and valorized all kinds of extractive, exploitative ways of making money. And then we're like, why are we in a trust crisis? Well, no kidding. So we have to reject that sense that the purpose of a corporation is just to make money for shareholders or make money for itself. Instead, we have to realize that every organization has a true north, has a sense of actual purpose, whether that's something very humble, like just building great products. Craftsmanship can be a value in itself. Bringing a little bit of beauty or efficiency or ease into people's lives, that can be a purpose. Or it can be something very lofty, like solving climate change or fixing inequality. Like there's so many ranges of aspirations, just like there's so many ways to live a human life. So that's the path of ethos, to enact and consistently stick to a deeper purpose than just making money. The irony of that is that when you do that, you wind up making a lot more money. But you can't know for sure that that's going to happen until you do it. You have to kind of do the right thing and let the chips fall where they may. The path of integrity is different. Integrity, when we apply it to a human being, generally means a person who will keep a promise. So if you have a friend, everyone has a friend. If I tell you, like, think of your high integrity friend, they're like, I know who I'm thinking about. If that person says they'll be there at 2:00, you know for sure they're going to be there. Because if they couldn't be there at 2:00 or they weren't sure, they wouldn't promise. So this is a person who can keep a promise. Well, for an organization, integrity, in order to keep a promise, requires kind of drawing on that second connotation of integrity, meaning structural integrity. If I tell you a certain bridge is made of stainless steel, you don't have to ask me if it's corroded with rust. The point of stainless steel is it cannot be corroded. Not like go across the bridge, it's less likely to collapse. No, you're saying, no, it's not going to collapse because it's not corroded, because it can't be corroded, because that's what it means to have its structural integrity. That's why stainless steel is one of the most valuable inventions of all time. Okay, so for an organization, these two senses of integrity are actually the same. In order for an organization to make and keep a promise, it has to be structurally strong. If any outside actor can pressure an organization to do the wrong thing, then you can't trust anything it believes. So organizations that are governed according to the philosophy of shareholder primacy are intrinsically untrustworthy, because the shareholders might change their mind at any time and just swap out new leadership, and next thing you know, whatever promises can't be kept. So we can't, if we want people to trust us, we can't have that happen. So the path of integrity is the way of an organization dealing with its board members, its investors, the sharing of power among its various internal factions, creating an alignment of interests at every level around that mission that we talked about in the path of ethos. When those two things combine, we build organizations that are actually like stainless steel. They are not capable of being corroded. They are literally incorruptible.
Tell me if you've heard this one. If you don't embrace AI, you're going to get left behind. While leaders are eager to unleash the power of AI, up to 42% of their team members report ambiguity surrounding best practices, expectations, and application of AI in their daily work. That data comes from Franklin Covey's newest insight report, AI Transformation and the Human Imperative. We found that AI alone won't give your company the competitive edge. It's the great leaders who design execution systems around human strengths that will amplify their people. Grab your free copy of the Insight Report from the show notes and embrace the human side of strategy. I love the tie to ethos and universal wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have both universal wisdom you're tying on and experiential, and then moving to structural. So here's my question. Some of our listeners may not be in a system that is ready to be moving to the integrity structural system, the stainless steel bridge, but they would like to take action within their own organization as leaders.
Yeah.
Loving the ties that you have between universal and experiential wisdom and the end in mind. For those that are saying, yeah, but okay, what can I do right now? Do you go back to your theory of small experiments within the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
organization? Are there things you have leaders specifically do? What would we leave and do today, assuming we're not quite in the structure you're building in your Incorruptible book?
Yeah, yeah. So it's really tricky because, when we talk about these structures, it all sounds very grand, and then that makes people feel like, gosh, it seems far off. But remember that every one of these reforms was just a person with an idea at one time. Now, sometimes that was the founder, but a lot of these stories are not really about a founder. They're about just somebody in the organization being like, wait a second, I don't think this is right, and asking the key question. Now, sometimes the way that became manifested is they ultimately do become a founder. That is actually, for a lot of people, that is the path. But I know that can sound very scary to people, so we don't have to go there. Just every person on this planet has a certain amount of power, even if it's just as a customer, as an employee, as a board member, as a middle manager, as a leader. Everyone has some level of power. And the question is just how we're going to use that power. And the cool thing about trustworthiness is it's an asset you can grab anytime. It's just always available as a resource. As you say, it is a universal wisdom. It's something that all human beings intuitively have an understanding and even a longing for. So I had this concept in the book I call the culture bank. This is one of the simplest ideas in the book, but very easy to implement, very hard to do consistently. It goes like this. Part of the problem with our modern series of OKRs and our ROI-based stack ranking efficiency culture in business today is that the most important decisions any individual manager makes score ROI negative kind of by definition. Because when I'm investing in treating customers well, the cost of doing that shows up on the balance sheet, but the returns are intangible or invisible. So the ROI appears to be negative in the current period. And so you have in every organization people I call torchbearers. These are like the people that are committed to doing the right thing kind of no matter what. If you've ever been one of those people, you'll know how exhausting it is because in our modern economy, if you're someone who wants to do the right thing, you will be besieged in your office every single day by people wielding spreadsheets trying to convince you to do the wrong thing because they've got the math that shows that if we, make the ingredients a little bit more addictive, if we take a little quality out, if we use plastic instead of stainless steel, if we create more dependence on the part of our customers, we can make an extra buck today. And you're like, but I know we can make an extra buck today. No kidding. But what about the long-term consequences? And they're like, well, what about them? Your stock options will be vested by then, but do you care? Okay. So in order to combat that pervasive problem, we have to make the trustworthiness asset visible, legible to people. And so this concept is called the culture bank. It's very simple. Whenever someone does the right thing, that means makes a sacrifice on behalf of the company for the sake of a customer or an employer or any other stakeholder, that is literally making a deposit in a bank account. That's how we create a strong culture. And whenever we do the reverse, it's a withdrawal. So first of all, using banking metaphors, we can start to see that when someone brings their spreadsheet to you and suggests doing the wrong thing, you can, instead of being like, oh, I have to compromise with this person, they're serious about business and my thing is kind of fluffy. And so you're like, no, this person is suggesting the liquidation of a critical asset. And I'm just like, I am empowered to say no to them. Okay. That's useful in its own way. But the second, even most powerful part of this technique, and this is the one that everyone squirms when I tell them, so just be prepared.
I'm ready to squirm.
Get ready. Here it goes. The simple rule, I learned this rule from Todd Park, the founder of Devoted Health, one of the most fastest growing private companies in the country. He said, it's a simple rule. Only make deposits. Never make withdrawals. So easy. And everyone hears it, they're like, that is too hard. Like, never? What do you mean never? It's like, yeah, never. If someone ever proposes to you, instead of having a meeting about it, just say no. Just be like, no, sorry. The rule is we never do that. Now, of course, some withdrawals are going to happen by accident because we're going to screw up. We make mistakes. It happens. But we should never intentionally try to betray our customers' trust. And what's cool about that, Clay Christensen, before he died, he wrote this very powerful statement. I think a lot of people overlooked it. He said it was easier to do the right thing 100% of the time than 98% of the time. Because like finding the exceptions is exhausting and you're always debating it. It's really hard. These ironclad black and white simple rules are so much easier to enforce and people feel so much more confident that the rule really will be followed if you have no exceptions. This is a rule that anybody can follow. You don't need any special permission. You could just start doing this tomorrow.
We have so much in common. Clay Christensen was a member of our board until his untimely passing.
Yeah.
And we've always used the metaphor of emotional bank account. You're taking it more structural to the culture bank account, but that you and I may have deposit and withdrawals amongst each other. Now you're doing it to the decisions that get made. And we literally don't do this. We literally don't make withdrawals. So much in common. I have loved this conversation. Eric, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you'd love to tell our listeners?
Well, I mean, the book obviously has a lot more detail, and I worry when you give a summary that people will be like, "Oh, okay, I got it. That's the whole thing." But no, one last thing I'll say is with the techniques that I talk about in the book, the most important question is actually not what techniques to master, but when to embrace them. So I'll share one last principle from the book, which is that it's always too early until it's too late. So generally speaking, when people encounter these ideas for the first time, if you go ask around, you ask a lawyer, a banker, a manager, a board member, just ask anybody you want, like for advice. And you're like, hey, I'm thinking about shifting in this direction. You very commonly get a very condescending answer, which is like, that sounds nice. Nice, honey. Oh yeah. Good thinking. Yeah. Do the right thing for sure. But first eat your vegetables. first get your business in order, like first make it profitable, first find product market fit, first do other stuff. And then if you have any extra left over for dessert, you can have a little mission, a little this, a little that. And as a result, people start to internalize this idea that the results, the business results you get are not actually related to the moral choices you make, which is so backwards. Where do you think the
So
results come
backwards.
from? It's an utterly backwards way. We've unfortunately trained a whole generation of board members to think this way. And it's causing immense value destruction. So the most important thing is to make a commitment to do the stuff first. Make it your top priority. Do it now before it's too late, before you've become too compromised to be able to do it. And trust, because you've looked at the data, not because of blind faith, but you looked at the data that if you do this, these other benefits will follow for you. And since you can try it in small ways, run the experiment. See if it makes your life a little better. And if it does, do a little more. Don't just be content that you figured out one thing. Maybe take the next step and the next. And next thing you know, you're on the board. You have a seat at the table. You're in the governance conversation because you have something to say about the most important questions any organization will ever face.
Thank you so much, Eric. Appreciate the advocacy for choosing the mission, the right first, and the results will follow.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for joining On Leadership with Eric Ries.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.